So as we keep talking about our decarbonization efforts, adding renewables, electrifying, we don't necessarily spend a lot of time talking about the grid, where all this electricity is flowing into and flowing out of. What is the carbon intensity of the grid if we do electrify? Where is it heading? How is the infrastructure going to handle everything? There's an awful lot of questions that need to be answered before we move forward. And our next speaker is going to help answer some of those questions. So Tim Burdis is Director of State Policy Solutions for the PJM Interconnection. As Senior Manager of State Policy Solutions, Tim manages a team of professionals who endeavor to harmonize emerging state electricity policies with wholesale market design and transmission system planning policies. His organization specifically focuses on offshore wind development, clean energy development, resource adequate evolution, grid modernization, and grid security maintenance, which is why he's here today. So, Tim, come on up. Tim, come on up.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you, Ray, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to Ray. Thank you to everybody here at the BIA. This is actually my first opportunity here to participate at the Energy Conference, and I just want to offer about how thoughtfully impressed I am with this particular conference, particularly the agenda itself and the programming of the agenda. I don't know if it was Ray or Rick who said it earlier about each presenter being able to have a little bit of a different perspective and to take one thing that they say as part of it. And as I look through the agenda, I see a lot of balance on the agenda from the stakeholders that are speaking here today. Sometimes at conferences, you don't necessarily get that. You get a lot of people who sometimes end up saying the same thing, and it's the one message that is intended to be imparted. So I say that to offer that, and just reinforce what, Rick or Ray said previously, which is try to take one perspective from each person today, at least one perspective, because I think it's going to help color in a very rich tapestry for the biggest challenge facing the energy industry today, which is decarbonization. I'm going to talk about, from our perspective and our placement in that tapestry, being able to maintain electric system reliability amid decarbonization and the energy transition. And how do we look at doing and performing that job over the next 20 to 30 years or so as the pace of energy transition really starts to pick up? But before I get ahead of myself, let me just start off by saying, again, I'm Tim Burdis. I'm with PJM Interconnection. My presentation is really broken up into three parts. First, I'm going to very quickly impart a little bit about PJM, what we are, and what do we do for the energy industry here in the state of New Jersey. Secondly, I'm going to talk a little bit about the state of the energy transition that's happening both regionally as well as here in the state of New Jersey. And then finally, I'm going to talk about reliability and how we believe playing a role in a reliable electric future will also help with decarbonization being bought into and move us into where we want to go with energy. I believe I have slides. Are we able to bring those up at the moment? And I also understand I'm in the unenviable position of being right before lunch, so I will be as efficient with my time as at all possible. As the slides are coming up, or maybe not, maybe I'll just go off the cuff. What I'll offer in the meantime is, so I represent a company called PJM. We are based in suburban Philadelphia. We're actually a company that started back in 1927, and it's a result of three electric utilities, public service here in New Jersey being one of them, coming together and literally interconnecting their franchise service utility territories together, PPL in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia Electric in Philadelphia, and public service here in New Jersey. So 1927, our utility partners come together and realize that there is a way that through sharing assets and through coordination with peer utilities, you can improve reliability and bring down costs for folks. And if you think about it, right, the people from Philadelphia on the weekend are driving down to the Jersey Shore. right? It's the same people who are using electricity in Philadelphia or at the Jersey Shore. You don't necessarily need to build power plants to serve those same people in two different locations. So PJM started, literally we have about almost 100 years of experience. We have grown in geographic size as well as in responsibilities. And we thank our utility partners for that. So we cover 13 states, Jersey out to Chicago, and down into North Carolina. If I had my slides, you would see on the second slide, I would say that we cover 3 different areas. And what we do in those 3 areas are regional transmission planning, operations, and markets. And so in those 3 respective areas, regional transmission planning, we work with our utility partners to say, how do we plan the electric transmission system as people are moving around, as generators are coming on and coming off of the system, and how do we make sure that the infrastructure is there in place, in time, and in a cost-effective manner for when that infrastructure is going to be needed for increased demand as well as for generators coming on or coming off of the system. Markets, we operate wholesale electricity markets across the region. This is something that provides lots of value, particularly to folks here in the state of New Jersey, which is an energy importer and historically has been an energy importer. And what that really means is that there is cheaper electricity in other portions of the PJM footprint, perhaps, whether that's on an ongoing, continual basis or that's just on a minute-by-minute basis. And what we do is we dispatch the electric system in a way that consistently provides the lowest possible electricity to consumers here in the state of New Jersey at any given moment in time. Finally, operations, it's really the bread and butter of what we do at PJM, and we operate the system with our utility partners on a minute-by-minute basis. So, the state of the energy transition itself. What is happening on a regional basis as well as what's happening here in the state of New Jersey. And so on a regional basis, in PJM, we make up 14 jurisdictions, 13 states and the District of Columbia. At least 8 of those states have electricity policies that are moving their systems towards some level of decarbonization. Some of those are at very high paces, New Jersey, Maryland, District of Columbia. Others have policies in place, but they may be a little bit more modest or maybe a little bit more stretched out. And for those types of states, I'm thinking maybe a Pennsylvania, maybe a Delaware, or maybe even an Illinois, although there's some aggressive near-term goals in the state of Illinois as well. As a result of that, what we see coming onto the electric system here in PJM is an influx of wind, solar, and particularly, as storage goes, electric battery storage onto the system. So we have what's called a queue. It is a line of generators who want to connect up to the system. We will study those generators and we will make sure that when they come onto the system, there are reinforcements on the transmission network for them to put those megawatts onto the system in a safe manner. And it's effectively the line of resources that want to come on and eventually make up the complexion of the PJM system. Right now, for the most part, our system mix, the resources that make up PJM to turn on the lights, is about a third nuclear, about a third coal, give or take, and about a third natural gas. Coal has obviously been decreasing over the years. Natural gas has been upticking and taking over the coal position, and then renewables, particularly solar and wind, has also been making up a basis in there. So I say a third, a third, a third. Really, there's a little bit of differentiation in there, and renewables make up maybe about 10%, eating into really the coal shale share there. Why is that important? Because when I look at what the queue is telling me, the resources that are going to come on into the future in the next 3 to 6 years, the queue is drastically different than what we have at the moment here with the present fuel mix. We have a present fuel mix that I offered there of coal, gas, nuclear, and then on the fringes, I would say some solar and wind energy. And that makes up about 180,000 megawatts of the PJM system. And recall 1 megawatt can roughly serve about 1,000 homes. So we have 180,000 megawatts on the PJM system at the moment. The queue itself, those resources that are looking to come onto the grid, 250,000 megawatts. So well above what we presently have on the system or need on the system at the moment. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I want to apologize because I did not get the slides in on time. So the fact that you were able to do this, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So thank you. Okay, let me just see. So this, sorry about that. Just want to see where we are in time. So this is the share of resources that are on the PJM system that make up that fuel mix. You see, going back to 2005, natural gas was really a marginal resource that we were utilizing at the time. I believe we heard from the gentleman with API previously about the influence of natural gas here over time and its consumption of the coal share of the resource mix. You see that very acutely here in the PJM region, particularly where you have Marcellus and Utica shale plays. This obviously makes up the largest emissions cut that we've seen in the PJM region, although the gray boxes here you see marginally increasing as well, with solar and wind increases in playing there, with nuclear remaining relatively stable throughout the time period. Okay, so this is the mix of resources presently connected up here just in the state of New Jersey. You have about 14,000 megawatts. In terms of demand in New Jersey, you have roughly in the 20-some thousand megawatt range or so. As I said, New Jersey is an energy importer. That is by design. That's the dynamic that's set up. The other caveat I'll offer about this slide, you see solar at 196. That is what we call derated, so it's 38% of the nameplate capacity. We use that for statistical purposes of when we can rely upon a resource, if it is intermittent or regularly out of service. Thermal resources get derated as well for being out of service. And also that doesn't include any behind the meter solar, which we know New Jersey obviously has lots of. So that's why that number is where it is. I just want to caveat that particular number. Okay, so this is the queue capacity. This is where I was at and discussing 260,000 megawatts on the PJM system in the queue. Recall, we have 180,000 on the system today. This is what is in line. This was what wants to get into the door, okay? Historically, about 10% of these resources in the queue come online. So you'd say maybe 26,000. Now that's a historic number. The past is not prologue, all of that stuff. The IRA is going to give you tailwinds. There's policies at the state level that are much more aggressive than they have been in the past. So does 10% hold? Probably not. What's a better number? I don't necessarily know. I don't know if it's 50%, 20%, 90%. But I do just want to offer that there is some percentage of these resources that will not make it to the grid. They're not going to make it to commercial operation. Historically, that number's been 10% or 26,000 megawatts. There's good reason to believe that number is probably going to be a little bit higher, though, given all the tailwinds of the energy transition here at the moment. What's amazing about this, though, is that this is the first time in my almost 20-year career at PJM where the queue is almost exclusively non-carbon emitting resources. You see a tiny sliver of about 7,000 megawatts of natural gas, call it 1,400 megawatts of other fuels, which could be upgrades to existing diesel plants or something like that. And then other than that, you're looking at wind, you're looking at storage, you're looking at solar, and you're looking at hybrid, which is a combination of, say, a battery and a solar plant together. So a massive, massive amount of renewables. This is the harbinger. This is what is coming onto the grid here at some point in time. And this is what we're seeing as system planners and making sure that we are ensuring reliability with our transmission owning partners and our utility partners, that the electricity is going to continue to flow when we start to emerge into a place with much more adaptation and adoption of these resources. Okay, that's the look of the queue in PJM, covering our 14 jurisdictions. This is the look of the queue just in the state of New Jersey. So 10% of that queue is resources that sit here in the state of New Jersey, 26,000 or so. Bulk of that is offshore wind. Obviously, some of that is spoken for with the actual policies themselves. Some of that is over and above what the actual policy mandates in the state of New Jersey exist. Some of that may be speculative. Some of it may not be. Obviously, there are goals here associated with the 11,000 or so of offshore wind at the moment. And then you have roughly about 7,000 on top of that. And then the makeup of the rest, you're looking at storage, you're looking at solar, hydro, hybrid, 1,000 megawatts of natural gas, 1,000 megawatts of natural gas here in the state of New Jersey as well, that's sitting in the queue. So again, this is the harbinger of what is to come at some point in time to make up the resource mix into the future. Okay, now I want to move on to the third part and really the primary takeaway of my presentation, which is about ensuring reliability here as we go off into the future. This is a look at future demand in the PJM system. Again, that's across the entire 14 jurisdiction range. One of the easiest jobs, maybe, I laugh, I have family in San Diego. The joke is the easiest job in the world is a weatherman in San Diego because it's sunny and 70 every day. Maybe one of the easier jobs in the electric industry until about 2007 was being a load forecaster, because it was pretty much 2-3% every year demand of electricity is going to increase, almost without fail. And then Great Recession happens, we have demand side management, peak shaving, energy efficiency, behind the meter solar, and things flatline, things regress, and it's all over the place. And we don't really quite to see the same 2 to 3% uptick of electricity demand over the last 15 years, really as a result of that sort of inflection point. Last year, that changed. And that changed as a result of a couple of things. The biggest one is electrification and the adaptation and adoption of data centers throughout the PJM footprint. And so where we've seen a lot of flatlining demand previously, we're now seeing uptick. And so the blue line is our load forecast in 2022, with the first time where we have a meaningful uptick in our demand. And then we update that in 2023. We update it on an annual basis. And you start to see a steeper increase. Again, that's driven largely by data center adoption, some by electrification policies or EV adoptions that we start to see on the out years. We have a dark black line, which is more so our if data centers are adopted more aggressively inside the PJM footprint, say in the Baltimore, D.C. area, out in Ohio, where there are some policies in those areas that are really encouraging the development of those facilities. We have forecasted the darker black line, but the green line is more so really the planning line that we use here at the moment. So that's increasing demand. At the same time, we have stuff planning to come off of the system over the next, call it 7 years or so. And it's 40,000 megawatts of resources that we have planned to come off of the system. The majority of those resources are a result of policy. So there are specific state or federal policies that are either directing the retirement of certain types of resources inside our footprint, or have compliance obligations where the likelihood of those existing fossil-based resources making the investments to upgrade to continue to run are probably not going to happen given the lifetime of the existing resource itself. And then we have a tiny bucket, about 3,000 megawatts or so, of forecasted economic retirements, which is just the resources aren't making enough money. We expect that they're going to go away. Could that change? Absolutely. The market conditions could change and those resources could find their way back in the money and stick around. Absent that, the first two bars here, 37,000 megawatts or so by 2030, we think are going away because, frankly, that's effectively what the law says. So 40,000 megawatts or so we predict going away. We also believe this to be a little bit of a conservative number. These estimates came out in February of this year. That was prior to the EPA's proposed greenhouse gas rule. And it also does not include a large coal plant in Pennsylvania that actually announced its retirement. It was not factored into these. So we do think that those resources are a bit conservative. Just wrapping up here, getting to the point. So that's supply going off of the system. We have load increasing. On the supply side of the scale, we have some stuff coming off. Can you fix it with stuff coming on? Absolutely. I just told you we have a queue of 250,000 megawatts, right? What we've seen so far is that even those resources that make their way through our queue are not necessarily coming online at the pace that we need them to. There's a variety of reasons, cost of capital with the financing issues. There's obviously supply chain issues that we understand are starting to clear up. There's some siting issues and permitting issues. There's some processing on the PJM side with the queue as well. But even those resources that have cleared the queue and are sitting there with all their documentation in place are still finding some challenges. And so this is to demonstrate where we believe adoption of the new supply can find itself coming in. Dark blue line is effectively a modest or conservative approach. That's roughly that 10% commercial operation number I was telling you. The dashed line is a higher estimate of commercial operation of everything that's in the queue, and that is to represent a lot of the tailwinds that we think are happening. Where is reality going to be? Probably somewhere in between. Probably somewhere in between. But we wanted to bound the new entry of where we see this coming out at. Why is this important? Because even with these resources coming on at this periodicity and the resources coming off of the system, it starts to get a little tight out around 2030 in terms of, do we have enough watts on the system with enough stuff coming on? It gets close, it gets tight, it's not worrisome. I'm not here to scare anybody by any stretch of the imagination. But I do just want to make sure that I'm imparting that we're observing that there are some conditions here that stuff has to come on to the system to meet stuff that we know is going to come off of the system. If there are delays, if there are challenges associated with that, things start to tighten up a little bit. So what does that mean from us and from our perspective at PJM? Here I am wrapping up. But we bucket the ability to address this concern and the energy transition challenges associated with reliability into three buckets. The first is resource performance. The stuff that we have on the system right now has to perform, and it has to perform at optimal levels. Winter Storm Elliott last December was a case where we observed suboptimal performance amongst some resources in our fleet. And that has to change. We have something that's underway right now at the moment, going to get filed with the commission down in DC very shortly, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that's going to make efforts to address that. It's not the silver bullet. There will be other efforts that have to be done, but we have to address performance of what's on the system today at the moment. Bucket number two, right? And so this is making sure that that timing issue I talked about, stuff coming off of the system and stuff coming onto the system, is addressed. That's a multifaceted way of doing it. It's about getting more stuff onto the system, processing it faster, doing what we can to encourage that stuff to get onto the system. It's also looking at the stuff coming off of the system and what do we need to do to either preserve it if we have to, encourage it to stick around, encourage it to make investments that it has to. So that's the second bucket, is trying to address that timing issue of stuff coming off and stuff coming on. And then third and finally, this is a little bit more of an outward look, more toward 2030 perhaps. And the specific efforts associated with this will come into focus in the next year to 2 years. But it's around the reliability attributes of thermal generation that intermittent generation just doesn't have. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just the characteristics of the machines. Dispatchability, the ability to control certain resources and have them come on at a certain point in time. Inertia on the system, having the spinning mass and being able to control throughout the system. So there are these types of reliability attributes that thermal resources do have, intermittent resources don't necessarily have. And we want to make sure we're doing our analysis that we're not losing the reliability attributes on the out years without adequate replacement. If there is adequate replacement, say with storage resources that can replace those reliability attributes, great, fantastic. We'll send the signal to make sure that that happens. But we want to make sure that those reliability attributes we rely upon to operate the electricity grid do not go away with the retirement of certain resources without us also having some replacement available. Finally, There is an effort underway at PJM. We call it ensuring a reliable transition. You can go to the website if you really wish to. We have about 16 different initiatives that address each one of those 3 themes I just offered up there, and how we plan to tackle each one of those themes, with the third one probably still having more work to do associated with it. But with the collection of our utility partners, generation owners, and all folks here in the industry, we do feel confident, obviously, with the energy transition and making sure we get there reliably. We just know that we have work to do. So with that, excuse me, with that, Ray, I will turn it back to you.
And thanks. We only have time for one question, which I'll take myself. My prerogative.
Chair's prerogative.
So can you just expand a little bit more, because you talked about the retirements, which are, baseload generation plants, intermittent sources, coming on. How, I'm not sure if there's going to be enough storage. You seem to not be concerned about it. Can you talk a little bit more about, natural gas, coal leaving, wind, solar coming on, and how that plays out from a reliability perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great question. So we have 180,000 or so megawatts on the system at the moment. 40,000 we think are coming off. So call it 140 of where we think we're going to be left, roughly speaking. And that, for the most part, is a combination of nuclear, natural gas, smaller proportion of coal. Coal makes up a majority of the 40 megawatts coming off that we project to. The replacement of those is almost exclusively going to be wind, solar, storage, some combination thereof. We do think that combination and that mix of resources is generally sufficient to continue to operate the grid with the reliability services that we need, because we still have a large bulk, and we are still going to need a large bulk of thermal generation, nuclear, natural gas, maybe some amount of coal, while at the same time introducing intermittent resources. So we feel pretty good about that. What we have to do is we have to make sure that, around the edges, and we get close to that, the timeline, that we're not losing and dipping underneath the line of the megawatts that we need.
Tim, thank you very much. Oh, go ahead, really quick.
I'll repeat it.
So, go ahead.
I have to ask this question. Very good, presentation, your projection is really interesting. But my question is about the politics, future politics, on the federal side and the state sides. I mean, if you can give us some quick feedback, that will, the politics have a huge impact impeding these, projections?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, so the question is about the politics impacting the projections. So, yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I can't detach the politics from, because policy is what is driving the queue for the most part at the moment, and a lot of the resources. There's economics of intermittent resources being, very economic and entering here, but certainly the tailwinds of our state RPS policies and the IRA and even speculation around future policies to come in vogue, are driving queue entry. And then on the retirement side, what was that, 30-some thousand megawatts or so we're attributing to policies. Could they conceivably be rolled back with administration changes, or legislature changes? Absolutely. At the moment, we don't necessarily see that happening, and so this is what we're preparing for here at the moment, though. I don't have a great answer for you other than to offer the lay of the land, that we observe the politics are entwined with that.
Tim, thank you.
Thank you.